parents acted like they only have my sister and completely forgot about me. I, 18M, had my entire childhood stolen from me by my spoiled sister. This year marks my 18th birthday, and I've recently become independent from my parents. My upbringing was incredibly difficult, largely due to my sister. She's about 10 years younger than me, and our family situation was complicated by an unplanned pregnancy. I don't have many specifics about the challenges my mother faced during her second pregnancy, as she rarely shared details with me. However, I'm aware that the strain was so severe that it affected her ability to conceive again. My mother spent a lot of time in the hospital that year, and there was a moment when her life was at risk during the birth of my sister. This event led my parents to focus intensely on my little sister, leaving me feeling like the other child in the family. My role was only to step in as a babysitter when they needed me. The deep-seated favoritism from my parents has led me to believe that they were unaware of the harm it was causing me. Now, as I reflect on this, I see how their actions have come back to haunt them. From the moment I turned 11, my parents insisted that my younger sister should blow out my candles because she was just 2 years old and would cry at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I was against it, but they made me do it. They would relight the candles for her to do it again. However, each time it felt like it was ruined. This continued every year and the years after that. They kept insisting on it until it became the usual thing. My sister also had to receive gifts on my birthdays. I never received any for hers. When I asked why, they simply said that boys don't need to worry about it as much. I knew I was young, but did they think that was a good reason? Not really. And my parents always chose a place my sister preferred over me for my birthday. Eventually, it felt like my sister was getting 2 birthdays a year, and I was left out. My parents made their lives revolve around my sister. If I wanted to do something, my sister had to want to do it too. Otherwise, it was off the table unless I could do it alone. I learned to just lock myself in my room with my video games because they didn't bother me there. Except when my sister wanted to come in and bother me. That's why I put a lock on the door. My parents wanted me to take it off, but I was a teenager who was fed up with being bothered at all times. Once my sister came in at the wrong time while I was doing something, and my parents got mad at me for it, even though I was in my room. When I pointed out how ridiculous that was, they backed down and let me keep the lock. My sister became quite a demanding and high-maintenance individual due to her daily indulgences and constant requests. To avoid her, I made every effort to stay away, even fabricating excuses to spare myself the hassle. I even went as far as making up stories to justify needing alone time. My parents decided to hire a young teenager to look after her, which granted me more personal space. However, the babysitter quit after my sister refused to follow her instructions, and my parents attempted to avoid paying her by claiming she had done a poor job. She then involved others in the situation, and eventually, my parents settled the matter by compensating her. They then employed another babysitter who remained. Yet they made it clear that I was responsible for watching my sister whenever I had free time, which I tried to avoid by making my work schedule as busy as possible. My sister treated me like her personal assistant, giving me orders. She even had a ridiculous nickname for me that she wouldn't stop using, which infuriated me. If I didn't fulfill her every demand, she would cry and complain to our parents, leading to accusations of mistreating her. Our arguments escalated, and our relationship with my parents deteriorated to the point where we hardly spoke. Despite this, during my high school graduation, they boasted to other parents about how they had motivated me to work hard, which was not entirely accurate. I worked hard, not for them, but for the freedom I would gain. My parents seemed to think I had achieved more than I did. They didn't even inquire about my academic performance until it was time for parent-teacher conferences, where I received a B and C average. After my graduation, my parents took me to a place where my sister would always have more fun than me, despite the trip being intended for me. On my 18th birthday in July, everything came to a head. Despite it being my big day, it seemed more about the celebration than me. I had this desperate wish that we'd celebrate at my favorite spot. But no, they chose the local imitation of Chuck E. Cheese, the only one close by. It became the go-to place for any major milestone, including my high school graduation. I mentioned it was my sister's favorite place, and it was filled with kids half my age partying. I was bored, stuck eating average pizza, playing claw machines for tickets to uninspiring prizes, and wasting time on arcade games for cheap rewards that didn't bring me any happiness. Then, it was time for the cake. My parents brought out one that was pink with white flowers and had my name on it. It was clear it wasn't a boy's cake, and there were only 10 candles. My parents lit them and placed them in front of my sister to blow out. That's when it all came crashing down. I had this overwhelming feeling of all the suppressed anger bursting out, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I started crying uncontrollably in front of the whole family. Everyone was so taken aback that it felt like time had stopped. I stood up, and all the emotions I had been holding in for the past 8 years just spilled out like a flood of words. The whole family witnessed this moment, and once it was concluded, I simply stepped outside to join the family car. Many relatives followed me out, apologizing and explaining they were unaware of the pink cake because my parents had concealed it until it was served. I reassured them it didn't matter. They all sat back, observing as my life had been consumed by Little Miss Sunshine for the last 8 years. I hadn't had any personal birthdays or celebrations. My life revolved around her. Then, on the most significant birthday of my life, they expected me to just smile and nod as they presented my sister with a cake that was supposed to be for her, even though it wasn't her actual birthday. Some relatives began to apologize. They justified their actions by saying they thought I was fine with it because my parents had said so. I made it clear I was not. My parents forced this on me every year, making me feign acceptance. I extended my arms, gesturing to our location. Does it look like the place I had envisioned for my graduation and 18th birthday? No one stood up for me throughout. I was just the lesser sibling while my sister received everything. I wasn't even allowed to invite my friends because my parents had stopped permitting it after they objected to my sister's birthday candles. There are 365 days in a year, so why was it wrong to celebrate one that was about me and not hers? Instead, I was labeled as the selfish and entitled one for wanting my birthday. Then, I simply returned to tears. By that time, my dad had stepped outside to scold me for causing such a scene. My mom was in tears. My sister was upset because I had spoiled her moment, and everyone present thought we were terrible parents. I confronted my dad, accusing him of being a bad parent and explaining why. After that, the whole family came out on him like a swarm of bees. He was practically cornered by the entrance of the restaurant. Soon, the majority of the crowd re-entered, wanting to confront my mom as well. My grandparents stayed by my side, regretting their inability to see things clearly for so long. I had no idea what had been said in the restaurant. It took about half an hour before they returned, looking utterly defeated. My mom was still sniffling from her tears, and neither of my parents could make eye contact with me. They awkwardly apologized for their actions. They offered to host the party somewhere else, but that wasn't enough for the crowd. One of my aunts exclaimed loudly, and my parents promised they would never let my sister blow out her candles again, give her presents on my birthday, or make it about her. Another Ahmed followed, and my parents apologized for choosing a cake that wasn't meant for me. They felt like I had lost interest in birthday cakes at my age. That was a terrible thing to say. I became enraged once more, shouting at them that my age didn't matter. They had essentially given my sister my birthday, and they knew it was wrong. I argued that it was too late to fix the situation. They had clearly shown that I meant nothing to them. They had ruined 8 years of my life as an adult. What could I look forward to on future birthdays with them? My dad started to get mad at me for saying that. But when the entire family started yelling at him, he quieted down. My grandfather supported me, saying I was exactly right. He believed there was no way to undo the harm that had been done. He described my parents as terrible people, favoring my sister, and treating me like an outcast since she was born. They were all terrible people themselves for allowing it to happen. I felt I deserved more than just an apology. I was owed my life back. My mother had another breakdown, attempting to approach me while sobbing and apologizing. However, I refused to let her near me, and the rest of the family made it clear they wouldn't allow her to come close either. I simply stated that I had had enough and began to walk away. An aunt pursued me and managed to bring me back. I could hear various family members shouting and swearing at my parents over the incident. Yet I was so overwhelmed by anger that I couldn't even feel any sense of relief or satisfaction after all these years. Additionally, where was my sister during this chaos? She remained at the restaurant, enjoying her cake and tearing open the presents meant for me. And for those wondering, yes, my parents gave her some cake after I had left in tears. It seemed absurd to think that would be their main concern at that moment. However, they were later criticized for it. My grandparents managed to calm me down and had me sit in their old minivan as the rest of the guests left the party. My sister went into a major meltdown upon being caught opening my gifts, one of which was a new smartphone she threw against the wall, shattering it because she was forbidden to keep it. She had just received a new phone for her birthday a few months back. I became so upset that I vowed I would never want to celebrate my birthday again. My grandparents allowed me to stay overnight at their place. Upon returning home, I still didn't speak to my parents. My mother continued to cry because I refused to speak to her. My father was just as silent as I was. The next weekend, my grandparents convinced me to join them for dinner. To my surprise, there was another gathering waiting for me. My parents were there, maintaining their cheerful facade throughout the evening. There was a large chocolate cake with 18 candles and a banner with my name. They referred to it as my joyous, belated birthday celebration, despite me not receiving any of the gifts I had hoped for this year. It seemed like one good party couldn't erase the years of favoritism or make any significant impact on it. Where was my sister? She was perched at the table, her arms crossed and her lip twisted, indicating it wasn't just about her anymore. Instead of singing Happy Birthday to me, they sang a different version titled Happy Day. Right after I blew out the candles, my sister let out a scream that was so loud it could have been heard from across the room. My parents had to escort her out and then bring her back in, only to find her even more upset than before. She spent the rest of the party sulking in her seat. Despite all this, I still received a new smartphone, and my sister had her phone taken away for her behavior at the last party. However, the smartphone wasn't the only thing I got. The entire family pooled in to buy me a car. It was an old white Volvo, but I was thrilled the moment I saw it. My grandfather, who's quite the car enthusiast, managed to fix it up himself. I was over the moon. However, my sister wasn't happy as she let out another scream. She began throwing a huge tantrum, insisting she also wanted a car. My mom had to take her to the bathroom, and they didn't return for quite some time. My dad seemed defeated. My sister had completely derailed their attempt to impress the whole family. Several family members also criticized my parents for raising her to be entitled and spoiled. I began driving the car as soon as I got behind the wheel. However, it wasn't until days later that my sister caused damage to the vehicle by wielding a hammer and shattering two of the side windows, as well as cracking the windshield to the extent that the car became inoperable. My parents intervened just in time to prevent further destruction. Yet, she went into a rage, screaming profusely when they took the hammer from her and attempted to restrain her, resorting to biting them. Everyone was incensed with my sister. My grandparents, in particular, were livid, as my grandfather had invested a lot of effort into the car, only to see it destroyed by her out-of-control behavior. My grandparents had spoiled my sister so much that she failed to understand that I had something she didn't. Additionally, several other relatives criticized my parents for enabling my sister's entitled behavior, accusing them of setting her up for failure by allowing her to believe she was entitled to everything. They believe she will have a difficult time as an adult because they haven't taught her any respect. Well, her misdeeds did not go unnoticed. My sister was placed on house arrest for the rest of the summer and was sent to boarding school starting the new school year. My mother broke down in tears over it. However, my father stood firm in his decision, believing it was necessary to begin repairing the damage they had caused. They have fully acknowledged their mistake. It was challenging for them not to, given the lack of support from others. My sister is currently miserable at the boarding school. She dislikes the uniform and the strict rules and has been caught lying frequently. Yet, With surveillance cameras almost everywhere, she's not able to get away with her lies. Our parents have tried to visit her a few times, but she has reacted violently, screaming at them for sending her there. It seems she will remain at the boarding school until she turns 18. My parents did spend money to repair my car. They had a company specializing in auto glass, replace the windows and windshield, restoring it to its original condition. In August, my grandfather approached me and mentioned he had found me a job with a friend. However, the job was 40 miles from where I lived, meaning I would have to move out of my parents' place if I wanted to avoid the daily commute. I was eager to move. Securing my first apartment proved to be quite challenging. I needed a credit card to be considered for a studio apartment, but I managed to obtain one. Since September, I've been living in my current place. My parents have been making numerous attempts to reach out to me, but I rarely respond. Whenever we do talk, I feel uneasy and uncomfortable. My grandfather has suggested that my parents might not want to admit their shortcomings as parents, and that seeking my forgiveness would only make them feel better about themselves, or something similar. However, I have no intention of forgiving them anytime soon. I am finally content and living independently. Now they have lost everything. They no longer have me or my sister, and my parents have had to work extra hours due to the high cost of boarding school for my sister. The expenses for my sister's education, the celebration for my graduation, and the car repairs have all contributed to the financial strain. It's a situation that feels unbearable to me, and I don't find joy in it. Yet it's a direct result of their choices. So yeah, it sucks having parents who treat you like trash and your siblings like gold. And I wish no one else has to go through it growing up like I did.